king.
A number of protests against his visit are taking place in London and elsewhere. A commission established by the UN has found Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. The Israeli government has rejected the findings, saying they are distorted and false. 3 people will go on trial in March after pleading not guilty to supporting the banned group Palestine Action. A man and 2 women were arrested after a protest in central London in July. And Hollywood is remembering Robert Redford following his death aged 89. He's best known for films including Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men and The Sting. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 81 points at 91.95. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.15. LBC weather: heavy rain affecting much of the UK tonight, but heavier in the west. Dry for northeast Scotland and windy, a low of 6. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. There were 2 things going on really at Westminster today, and I think you need to know about both of them. The first was a deadly serious attack on the position of Keir Starmer over the Mandelson affair in the Commons chamber, but also away from the cameras inside the Parliamentary Labour Party, where many MPs want the Prime Minister and his advisers out, starting with Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's Chief of Staff. The second thing that's going on is that after Elon Musk called for the dissolution of Parliament at the weekend London rally, telling the huge crowds, violence is coming, fight back or die, Labour politicians have, perhaps late in the day, found their voices. Starmer today described the anti-migrant marchers as plastic patriots who sent a shiver through many of our communities. Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, said, whether you're a hostile state or a hostile billionaire, no one gets to mess with British democracy. And Ed Miliband on this show last night said this.
Who the hell is this guy, is my reaction. Just because you're a billionaire, it doesn't give you a right to come and tell us how to run our country. And look, as far as I can see, this guy is a publicity-seeking narcissist who is inciting violence on our streets. And honestly, you know, he should go back to running his car company, and I think, as the Americans would say, butt out of our politics.
Now, let me be crystal clear. I don't think for a moment that everybody on that march was far right or racist. There were good people. There were, no doubt, bad people as well. And yes, I do think there's a problem with the scale of migration right now. But it is significant that a government which has so often seemed soupy and grey, not quite sure what it's for or against, was on the very eve of Donald Trump's state visit at last on the attack. But I'd like to begin tonight with the attacks on Starmer over appointing Lord Mandelson as US ambassador. In a debate led by the Tory MP David Davis, he laid out a detailed charge sheet. But perhaps this wouldn't have been as dangerous for the Prime Minister had it been limited to the opposition benches. It wasn't. As a flurry of Labour backbenchers piled in, so too did the leader of the Liberal Democrats, who also took part in the debate, Sir Ed Davey. I wanted to know what he thought the real questions Keir Starmer still had to answer were.
He just needs to tell us what he knew and when. I mean, I came to Prime Minister's questions last week assuming he would fire Lord Mandelson the minute before midday so he could say that dispatch box, because the evidence that I'd seen suggested he should go. But he's trying to maintain that there was evidence he saw after Prime Minister's questions. Let him prove that.
Yes, there were the emails about the depth of Mandelson's relationship with Epstein, which did come later in the day. But you think even before those, there was so much evidence that he should have fired him first?
I do. There was evidence going back some time. But when we've seen the recent emails, the ones we saw before Prime Minister's questions, I think that left him really in no doubt. He should have sacked Mandelson. Indeed, I actually assumed he would. I came with a different question, and then I had to change my mind because I thought he should have gone.
A lot of the debate today focused on problems of vetting right across the British system, the sense that the Foreign Office, the security services hadn't been asked to vet Lord Mandelson before this appointment because it was a political appointment. And quite a lot of anger that the Foreign Affairs Select Committee wasn't given its chance to challenge Lord Mandelson before the appointment was made.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, there's a piece of legislation that needs to change because it gives this slight opt-out for political appointments, which I always thought was wrong. So we need to change the law, but we also need to change the processes in Parliament. I think it should be a requirement that when you have political appointments and the really big appointments, they should go to the relevant select committee for confirmatory hearings so that the public and the government hear the view of Parliament before a appointment is finally made.
So in a sense, you think this whole business was too closed, too airless, too sticky?
Yeah, and it's not the first time, is it? It's happened too many times in the past. And I think the public want greater transparency. And I think they do want their MPs and MPs who are specialists in the area on select committees to have a greater role.
Now, it's hardly a state secret that the Prime Minister is under intense pressure in all sorts of ways. What's your assessment of his position now?
It's really, really weak. I saw him in the tea room yesterday and in the smoking room in the House of Commons where you can't smoke. You can have a drink in. I've never seen him there before last night. That suggests to me he knows he's under serious pressure. And it's not just this Mandelson affair, although that in many ways brought it to a point. It's all the issues around the many mistakes they've made, the lack of a sense of direction. And my sense is the Labour government has lost the trust of many people in the way the Conservative Party has. And that means in British politics, if people are looking for a party that's going to change the direction, going to reform our country, they either go to reform on the extreme of British politics and go for a change which takes us to Trump's America, or they go to the Liberal Democrats, who are more in tune, I think, with British values, where we've got seriously well thought through proposals to reform our health service, to get energy bills down, to help people with the cost of living, and political reform. And I think when that comparison is made between the Liberal Democrats and reform, we will make even greater progress.
We've had a series of cabinet ministers using very strong language about Elon Musk and his clear incitement to violence at last weekend's big march on the streets of London. You and Elon Musk have a kind of ongoing feud.
We have history.
You have history. Are you pleased to see Labour ministers say things like he should butt out of British politics?
Yeah, I think they should go further, frankly. Let's remember what he said in the past. He said civil war is inevitable in the UK. He's called for the overthrow of an elected British government. This is scandalous, and I think the government needs to be harder on him. And when these things arise, I always say follow the money. And I think what Elon Musk is most about is his own commercial interests, whether it's in social media or in Tesla, and I think we need to hit him where it hurts. So whether it's regulation, the Online Safety Act, there are improvements that can be made on it, but regulating social media companies who are doing harm, and the digital service tax, that shouldn't be cut. And I hope that in any deal they do with President Trump during state visit, they're tough on American tech firms.
And, of course, it's about our personal behaviour. Ed Miliband yesterday quite liked the idea, I thought, of everybody, including the government, coming off X.
Well, I mean, if everybody does and that, kills X in the country, I'm up for that. The problem is if you come off some platforms, you leave a space, a vacuum for the extreme forces. Side, yeah. And that means people don't get to hear alternatives. I'm not a big fan of X, I can assure you. Now,
you've decided clearly not to meet Donald Trump on this visit, which begins tonight. He is coming with all sorts of agendas. One of them is about free speech, so-called, and the British government's attitude to people on the right of politics. Do you think that the Prime Minister and Donald Trump need to have an argument about this?
I think they need to have an argument on that and on many things. The idea that we hear from President Trump and J.D. Vance that they are the protectors of free speech when they're undermining both the media in the United States, putting pressure even on the judiciary, they have nothing to tell us about free speech. When people like Nigel Farage go to the US Congress and say the UK has become like North Korea, what an insult to our country from Mr. Farage.
Of course, there's a big foreign affairs agenda as well, including Gaza. Today, the United Nations Commission has said that they think Israel has committed genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, we've condemned Hamas as a genocidal organisation, but now you've got this UN report that says the Netanyahu government has committed genocide in Gaza. And
you have kept away from that word yourself. What is your position now?
Well, now we've seen this UN report. We've been looking at the International Association of Genocidal Scholars. We've been looking at Israeli organisation like B'Tselem. They have all said there's a genocide, and I say with them, there is a genocide. And I think, given President Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize, he should stop it. He can stop it. And one of the reasons I'm not going to the banquet tonight is not only I wouldn't get a chance to speak to President Trump, that's not how they work, but I wanted the media discussions over his state visit to focus on the fact that he has the power to stop it. He could ring up Netanyahu and demand a ceasefire, demand that the food gets in to those innocent Palestinians, and he could ring up the Qatari government and other Gulf states so they would put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. He is a very powerful man. He's choosing not to use that power. And when a genocide is happening, that is quite appalling.
Sir Davey, thank you very much for coming in and talking to LBC.
Thank you.
And joining me now in the studio, the former Cabinet Minister, Conservative MP, and now editor of The Spectator, also about to launch his own podcast, Michael Gove. Michael, you have seen some ups and downs, some turmoil in Downing Street in your time. What's your assessment of where Keir Starmer really is at now?
Well, I think the last 2 weeks have been deeply troubling for Keir Starmer and those closest to him. So the departure of Angela Rayner, they felt as though they were bouncing back out with a reshuffle where they'd wrested back control of the narrative, and the appointment of people like Shpola Mahmood and Pat McFadden was seen as a victory for the slightly more right-wing, blue Labourish elements that are very well represented in Starmer's Downing Street. But then came the Mandelson resignation, and this is still a seeping wound. We heard in the House of Commons today that there was only one Labour MP prepared, and he risked ridicule to defend the Prime Minister's position. And more broadly, the Prime Minister's political machine lost a key figure in Paul Ivenden, a very talented figure, though perhaps not well known to listeners, yesterday.
And the guy who wrote Keir Starmer's speeches, or one of them anyway, so he's got a big speech coming up at conference.
Precisely. And now the vultures and the hyenas are circling for Paul Ovenden's colleague, the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. Now, I suspect that Morgan McSweeney has significantly more guile and wisdom than many of his detractors. But the stories about Paul Ovenden that led to his departure are in a blockbuster book that figures on the left of the Labour Party are hymning, out next month, which they argue will be a further destabilising blow at the time of Labour's conference.
It's a great big bag of revenge, in short, or so it is thought. Starmer, and in the end, this comes down to personalities a lot of the time, because I think in the short term, the left aren't going to move against him because they haven't got a candidate yet, and the right aren't going to move against him because they're contaminated by the Mandelson affair. However, a lot depends on Starmer's own mood. Again, what's your reading of him? This is quite a stubborn man, I think.
Yes, he's phlegmatic, and it's the case that while he feels certain emotions keenly, and we've seen that in what he's said and what's been written about him when it comes to family matters, so he's not a bloodless technocrat, but it is the case that when he puts on his political armour, as it were, then he take these blows and he carries on executing what he believes to be the right plan. And it's certainly the case that quite a lot of the heat and energy within the Labour Party will be absorbed in the deputy leadership contest at the moment. So while there's a lot of furious speculation about Starmer's own position, I think it will be the case that it's the battle between Bridget Phillipson and Lucy Powell that will be a proxy for a lot of these passions.
Sometimes it's very useful to have a proxy going on. Let me ask you about the right of politics now, because among the other things we've seen this week, these big demonstrations on the streets of London. And as I said earlier on, most people there will have been thoroughly decent people worried about migration, worried about the way the country's going, but also some outright fascists, some outright racists, and extraordinary things said by Elon Musk. Clearly incitements to violence on the streets of London by one of President Trump's former close allies and one of the world's richest men.
Yes, it is worrying. Like almost everyone, I would support the right to protest, and I think you are absolutely right to identify that when you have more than 100,000 people on the street, many of them are palpably decent people who have concerns that they feel that have gone unaddressed. But the danger is that the people who were leading that rally, people like Tommy Robinson, have a criminal record, and Elon Musk's own language was positively insurrectionary.
In the context of Charlie Kirk, his ally, just being shot and killed.
Well,
bizarre.
One of the concerns that I have is that our politics increasingly resembles the 1930s, in that what we see are politics moving from the corridors of power onto the streets of our capital. We see people rallying behind different flags, whether it's the Palestinian flag, which, again, I think it's absolutely legitimate for people to feel an identification and an empathy with the Palestinian cause, but it's now become increasingly a symbol around which one tribe rallies, and the St. George's Cross has moved from being a flag on top of churches and on football grounds to the flag of another tribe, and we see that lack of faith in democracy and in civilized disagreement, which is concerning.
I'm really interested in this, and I know that you are a man of faith, or you're a Christian. But what is your feeling about all of those crosses being on the Tommy Robinson March, and indeed people dressed up as crusaders, which wasn't a very subtle dig at the Muslim population of the country?
It is profoundly concerning, because what we've seen is that the most strident voices claiming to speak for the British Muslim community have been people either in the House of Commons or outside it, who are quite radical in their political views and in their interpretation
full-scale
of Islam.
Islamists in some cases.
Absolutely Islamists. Yeah. And on the other side, the Deuce church-going majority, whether it's in the Church of England or in the Church of Scotland, are people whose politics is practiced predominantly in private. And yet, we did see at this rally comments from some people. I'm sure their faith is sincere, but the way in which they expressed it was polarizing rather than the quiet but firm principle that you would expect of men and women of the cloth.
It wasn't exactly New Testament in my view. Let me ask you about Danny Kruger.
Yes.
Talking of people of faith, he has been a very, very important figure in the Conservative Party around issues of community, family, traditional values, patriotism. He has now gone over to Reform. That's a very big blow for Kemi Badenoch. It's a very big blow for the Conservative Party.
It undoubtedly is. So previous recruits to Reform from the Conservatives have either been, some of them good people, but they've either been ever so slightly shop-soiled by events or ever so slightly eccentric. Now you have someone who everyone across the political spectrum recognises as a person of principle, person of parliamentary weight. His campaign against the assisted dying bill
was part of the future of the Conservative Party.
Exactly, was lauded. And one of the comparisons that we've drawn in the Spectator is that we've said that Reform have tended to be a bit of a pirate crew. And they've been flying under the Jolly Roger, pillaging the good ship Tory. But now it's as though young midshipman Hornblower, the flower of the Royal Navy, has joined the pirate crew, because Danny Kruger is palpably a decent, fair-minded person in his personal dealings and sincere in his political beliefs and wise and intelligent when it comes to political conversation.
Final question. You've interviewed Donald Trump. He's coming over here at a time when he's very, very worried about free speech. He's no doubt very worried about the assassination of his colleague Charlie Kirk. What do you think he's going to be wanting from Keir Starmer? What do you think he wants from this visit?
I think more than anything, what he wants and what he will get is the validation of appearing alongside the King in Windsor Castle. So in a sense, it's the symbolism of Keir Starmer and the British state putting itself at the service of Donald Trump. And in that sense, I think he probably sees Keir Starmer as a bit of a character from Downton Abbey. He may look like the Earl of Grantham, but he acts as Carson the butler for the president.
And it's really about a lot of up-level stroking and smoothing of his ego.
Exactly.
As it often is. Michael Gove, thank you very much indeed for that. And don't forget that Ian Dale will be joined by the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch on the first of her monthly phone-ins. Coming up, President Donald Trump has now left the White House and he's on his way to the UK for his second state visit. How will that special relationship fare after the Prime Minister sacked his US ambassador last week for close ties to Jeffrey Epstein? More on that next, but the time now is 6:20.
Call Kemi. Put your questions to the leader of the Conservative Party. Tonight from 8, only on LBC. Rover. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:22. President Trump, as we've just been saying, is due to fly into London this evening before he heads off to join the King and Queen at Windsor Castle, and then finally on Thursday goes to Chequers for talks with Keir Starmer. The Trump team arrive still scarred by the murder of their colleague Charlie Kirk, and with a big agenda that covers investment, Ukraine, free speech and much else. Let's talk first to Katie MacFarland, Deputy National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration and a regular Republican commentator in the US. Katie, thank you very much indeed for joining me tonight. We've already heard from the President as he got onto Air Force One. He understands that we're going to be looking in Britain for refinements on the trade deals he's struck already. But what else do you think is foremost in his mind at the moment?
I think foremost is just a relationship building. This is a historic trip. President Trump is taking that very seriously. It's a historic trip in the sense that it's the only president in modern time, I think ever, to have two royal state visits with the United Kingdom. And obviously, President Trump takes that personally. It means a lot to him as a person, but he also takes it as a great compliment to the country. You know, his love of Great Britain is deep and significant. His mother was a Scot. He adored her. She taught him all of his hard work values. And so I think he looks upon this as, you know, probably much more so and much more personally than any American president has done. And that's important to Donald Trump because he believes in personal diplomacy.
Talking of the personal, how upset, how disconcerted do you think he is by the sacking of Lord Mandelson as British ambassador to Washington?
I don't think it matters. You know, the thing I've learned about President Trump is, and I've worked for 4 American presidents going back to Richard Nixon, most of the time when these official visits happen, it's after all the negotiating has been done at the staff level. And then by the time the leaders meet, well, they just put their sign for the pictures and it's all done. There's no real going back and forth. President Trump actually, as a businessman, does things in the opposite way. He believes that if he has that personal relationship, has that understanding with the foreign leaders, then he'll direct the staff to do the work. So I think that the situation where the timing maybe isn't terrific of the British ambassador leaving, it's not going to make a bit of difference to the negotiations.
I guess the reason I was asking is that it was said around the time of the actual resignation that because it was all because of Mandelson's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and President Trump has his own issues there, this might be regarded by the Trump White House as a kind of hostile act.
I don't think so at all. You know, no, absolutely not. I think the president is looking at this as a real opportunity to make further advancements on the U.S.-UK trade deal. You know, it was the first one that we signed, that President Trump has signed, and he deliberately signed it with Great Britain. He wanted Britain to go first. And the fact that he's coming not just with his cabinet officers, but that he's coming with this leading technology giants from the United States, I think is a good sign that that's where they hope the relationship goes going forward, is that we can develop together. It'll help both of our economies, but particularly yours.
And finally, just on the mood of Team Trump, as it were, this comes after the awful shooting of Charlie Kirk, the murder of Charlie Kirk, who was very close to President Trump and to the MAGA movement generally. Trump has said some pretty aggressive things about the atmosphere of violence and hatred on the left of politics. Do you think this is going to be a kind of turning point culturally in the Trump administration?
I do think it's a turning point, not just in the Trump administration. Trump was the turning point, but I think it's a turning point in the United States. I mean, we've seen in the last 4 days, it wasn't just the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who was a friend of mine, but it was the reaction of the far left in the United States, of people literally dancing on the grave. And that, I think, has been a turning point in the country, particularly young people. You know, 7 days ago, there were 3,000 chapters of Turning Point USA in American colleges and high schools. Now, 30 or 40,000 colleges and high schools have come forward saying, we want to do that too. We want to do what Charlie Kirk did. So I think that the turning point is not in Washington, it's around the country.
Well, it's a fascinating moment. Katie, thank you very much indeed, Katie MacFarland, for talking to me tonight. Always a pleasure. But of course, as we were discussing just then, there are deep divisions between the MAGA world and Britain over the meaning of free speech. And President Trump will be well aware Keir Starmer is now struggling in the polls and is under huge pressure politically. How much will all of that change the tone of the visit? And are there dangers ahead, perhaps, for the British side? Let's talk now to Mehdi Hasan, the British-born US-based commentator and founder of Zeteo Media. Mehdi, thanks indeed for talking to me again tonight. What is your view of Trump's view of Starmer?
I don't think Trump has a very strong view of Keir Starmer. I think Trump views people as instruments. Are they of benefit? Are they not of benefit? He switches on a dime. Look at Qatar. At one point, he thought Qatar was a terrorist nation. Now he loves Qatar and is saying, well, Israel shouldn't have attacked you. Emir's my friend. He will be happy with Starmer until he's not happy with Starmer. The same is true of every Western leader, every non-Western leader. Trump sees the world only through what is of benefit to him at any moment in time.
One of the big issues we haven't talked about on the show yet is, of course, Ukraine, where the idea of Trump imposing new sanctions on Russia if Russia didn't cease the attacks that are going on right now seems to be receding. He seems to be letting Putin off the hook again.
Yeah, the one person who Donald Trump never really wants to clash with is Vladimir Putin. Like, you can line up all of the world leaders over the past 9-10 years since Donald Trump emerged on the global stage as a politician, and there's only one person you can consistently find he will not criticize, will not condemn. Even Xi Jinping, even Kim Jong-un, who he loves and calls his friends, he's criticized them personally in the past, but not Putin. And of course, this is the man, Andrew, as we all know, who said he would solve the Ukraine war in 24 hours, he said. He didn't say it once, he said it multiple times. He's now been in office 8 months. We are no closer to a resolution in Ukraine. He's actually made it worse for the Ukrainians by berating their president in the Oval Office, by behaving like a mob boss. He treats NATO as, mob bosses would treat organizations, protection money. It'll be interesting to see if Starmer can stand up to you. You saw all the European leaders turn up in DC to try and form this coalition of the willing. Look, the mood in Washington, DC, the mood on the right here is nothing for Ukraine. They have no interest in protecting Ukraine.
And Mehdi, you are a very well-known figure now on the left of American politics. How concerned are you about what President Trump has said in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination about the, quotes, terrorism, quotes, of Antifa and parts of the left in America? It does appear that something quite hardline is coming.
Andrew, after a national tragedy, after someone is murdered for their views, and we all condemn the killing of Charlie Kirk, whatever our views of him were, you expect a national leader to bring the country together, like a Barack Obama, like a Joe Biden, even George W. Bush, not a man I'm fond of, after 9/11. Bring the country together, unite, don't say more incendiary stuff, don't throw petrol on the fire. That is what Donald Trump has done for the past week. In fact, just before I came on air, Andrew, I saw him this morning talking to an Australian reporter who he told to be quiet, and then he told an American reporter at ABC News, we may investigate you. The DOJ may investigate your news organization because you say mean things about me. This is a government now that has used Charlie Kirk's death, Andrew, to really crack down on speech in this country. They were already doing it before, but this is the most anti-free speech, anti-press administration of my lifetime. So it is very worrying, and I hope British commentators and journalists bring this up while Donald Trump is in the UK, because don't forget, Andrew, you know better than me, everything that happens in the US happens in the UK not long afterwards. So the anti-speech movement here will migrate there too.
In many ways, I'm afraid it already has. But Mehdi Hasan, for now, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC. Coming up, the United Nations announced today that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza as the IDF launched their ground invasion of Gaza City. I'll be speaking to an MP who's a doctor as well and who visited the region. Time now, 6:30, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
The leader of the Liberal Democrats has told LBC there is a genocide in Gaza and Donald Trump can stop it. Speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr, Davey says he's choosing not to use his power ahead of the US president's state visit to the UK. The first legal challenge against a migrant being deported under the government's new one-in, one-out returns deal is being heard at the High Court. The Home Office says the unnamed man should claim asylum in France, but his lawyers argue he faces a real risk of destitution if he returns. And Hollywood is remembering Robert Redford as a lion and a genius following his death aged 89. He's known for on-screen roles including All the President's Men and Indecent Proposal, but off-screen he founded the Sundance Film Festival. LBC weather, heavy rain affecting much of the UK tonight, but heavier in the west, dry for northeast Scotland and windy, a low of 6 degrees.
On on the latest episode of The Newsagents.
We're asking if Charlie Kirk's death is being weaponized to shut down dissent and free speech now in America. You can listen now by using our free Global Player app.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. This is LBC. Message Andrew Marr on WhatsApp now on 0345 6060 973.
The really big foreign news story now. As the Israeli Defense Force launches its long-awaited ground invasion of Gaza City, which the Palestinians say is being turned into a mass graveyard and give their death toll now at 65,000 people, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry, as we heard earlier in the show, has concluded that Israel has committed genocide. Let's begin by getting the latest from what's happening with Mark Laity, the former NATO spokesperson and defence correspondent. Mark, very good to have you on the show. This appears to be, and I think tonight the Israeli government has confirmed, this is the big ground invasion of Gaza City getting underway.
Absolutely. It was clear this morning that it was getting underway. Now they're already saying they've taken 40% of Gaza City. They've said they were bombed at 850 targets over the last day or so. So, yes, they are now basically trying their best to clear out Gaza City, and there's hundreds of thousands of refugees on the road.
They would argue that this is the last stronghold of Hamas. Is there some truth in that?
Well, there might be some truth in it, but it's disproportionate to the effect it's to what they want, in the sense that what is Hamas? It's being dismantled as a coherent military force. It's now a bunch of basically armed militants who are hiding out. And how are they going to find them? There's 1 million people there. You cannot kill Hamas in the way that they're doing. And indeed, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff, has said this isn't the way to do it. So it may well be the last redoubt, but when they clear out the people, they'll be clearing out Hamas with them. And they are, in effect, they've already won in the sense they've dismantled Hamas. What they're going to achieve now is basically make the rubble bounce.
Make the rubble bounce. There will be a lot of absolutely terrified people living in and around the rubble. There have been talks about humanitarian corridors to allow people to evacuate, to escape from Hamas City, from Gaza City. How realistic is that? In other words, how easy is it to get out of Gaza if you're stuck there now?
Terribly difficult. I mean, you're talking, a lot of these people have moved repeatedly before. So they're tired, they're exhausted, they're weak. The corridors are very narrow, unable to cope with the number of people going. The number of vehicles available really aren't there. So they may be corridors, but they are really not sufficient for the need. And, you know, you're talking about a lot of people who need support, need food, children going. So they may be corridors, but they're totally inadequate to the task.
I know that the Israelis called up tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands even, of reservists for this. How big an operation is it, and how long do you think it's going to go on for?
Well, I think the duration we're not sure about, but they called up something like 5 divisions, which is, you're talking, I think you will be talking about a 6-figure number of people now. And a lot of these people have been called up once or twice before, because remember that the regular army of Israel is relatively small and is dependent on reserves being called up. So the stress this is putting on the Israeli economy, Israeli people, is immense. So they can't keep doing this. In effect, they've turned themselves into a war economy and also almost an army rather than a country. So the ability to sustain this kind of offensive again and again and again without a huge price is limited. So I think it will go on for a fair while because they have no choice. But I think their ability to sustain it in the long term militarily is questionable.
That's an interesting point I hadn't heard before. Mark Laity, thank you so much for it. Let's turn now to the Labour MP Rosena Allin-Khan, who has visited Gaza as a humanitarian doctor and who described the situation there before simply as hell. I wondered whether she thought that using the word genocide would make any difference.
It is a significant finding and significant confirmation, one which many of us have known for a while. But for it to be deemed a genocide, there has to be 1 out of 5 conditions met. And in fact, 4 out of 5 conditions were met. What that means is that the international community now has an obligation not just to prevent genocide, but to punish it.
And so that might mean The Hague for senior Israeli leaders and military commanders.
Trial in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, yes.
Now, you described the situation when you saw Gaza last time as hell. Now we have the ground attack on Gaza City, where I think almost 1 million people are living. Can you explain to people, because everyone has heard about Gaza endlessly now for the last 2 years, and some people are kind of tuning out, they're beginning to lose interest. Can you tell them why this is such a significant moment?
I think many people have seen images play out over social media, some in the mainstream media. But I think it can't be overstated just how monumental the scale of the catastrophe is there. Of course, the attacks on October 7th that precipitated all of this were heinous, and we absolutely want the hostages to come home and be brought back safely. But mass starvation of an entire population of people, the complete death and destruction, 65,000 people have been killed, over 150,000 people have been injured. But Andrew, above and beyond that, it's all the things like people not being able to give birth safely. It's people not being able to have access to diabetic medication, heart medication, dialysis, dying in that way. It is the deliberate withholding of food being used as a weapon of war, people finding parts of their children's bodies and trying to identify them. A&E doctors, and I know we've spoken about this together before, A&E doctors going to work in a hospital department only to find charred body parts of 8 of their own children coming to them on a shift. It is entirely unimaginable. And it's entirely avoidable. And if we look at things in the past like Bosnia and Rwanda, and we always say never again, it is now, it is again. And the international community have to act. And you have spoken out eloquently. And frankly, hundreds, if not thousands, of Western politicians have spoken out about this. And parliaments all over the world have passed motions, and the United Nations has debated it. And frankly, none of this has had any effect whatever on Benjamin Netanyahu and what he wants to do. There's been no impact really on Israel. Now, we've got President Trump arriving tonight in this country. He may have some impact. What would be your message to him? My message to President Trump, to our own Prime Minister, to all world leaders, please come together and unite in the face of this genocide, because each day that we wait, more lives are being lost. There are 2.1 million people at risk of famine. We have 90% of people have lost their homes. They are living without a shelter. The scale of inhumanity is so huge that we have a moral obligation to do something about it.
What more do you think the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the new Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper could be doing?
We have done some good things already. We have stopped selling some arms to Israel. We have imposed some sanctions. But there is more that we can do. We can lead by getting allies together to talk about how we collectively stop this and put pressure on, because you're absolutely right, Andrew, that Benjamin Netanyahu is acting with impunity. He feels that no one's done enough to stop him. He can get away with it. We can stop all arms sales to Israel. Any components, all of them must be stopped. We can impose more sanctions, and we can recognise that a genocide is being committed. We can absolutely get behind that and do what we're meant to do, which is use our, we are pen holders, the international.
So from now on, do you think Keir Starmer, do you think Yvette Cooper, do you think other members of the government should start to use the word genocide regularly themselves?
Well, ultimately, experts, the very experts in the field that, worked on prescribing Rwanda as a genocide, worked on those cases, they are saying, world experts are saying it. The UN Commission of Inquiry has made it really clear that a genocide is being committed. As I said earlier, 4 out of 5 conditions have been met when only one is needed to give it that title. It is really clear what is happening, and we need to accept that that's happening here in this country and around the world, and use everything at our disposal to stop it.
You have come out for Lucy Powell in the Labour deputy leadership campaign. There's a big argument going on. What do you think needs to change in Downing Street to actually put your party back on a more level course?
Well, I came out in support of Lucy Powell because I think she'll be a fantastic campaigning deputy leader. That's what we need. We need somebody to get out there on the ground and understand that we don't just have to take the fight to reform. We also have a lot of pressure from the Greens and the Liberal Democrats because of things like our stance on Gaza, because of things like the chaotic welfare bill votes. And I believe that Lucy will be someone who will be really focused on delivering that job, because we've seen with the riots this week that people need to feel heard, need to feel as though they have a government on their side. And we are doing some brilliant things in government. For example, we've rolled out 30 hours of free childcare. We're increasing our ties with Europe. There are many good things, but there's a significant way to go.
Well, let's pick up a little bit of what Rosena Allin-Khan was saying there about the mood inside the Labour Party, and particularly the deputy leadership contest, because I'm joined now by LBC's political correspondent, Aggie Chambre. Aggie, first of all, you bring us some news about the deputy leadership contest itself.
Indeed. So Lucy Powell is 17 percentage points ahead of Bridget Phillipson. Those, of course, the only two in the running, according to a survey of party members by Labour list. So it was thought that Bridget Phillipson, she was the most popular when there was polling, that she would be the one to win, but actually looking like that could be in jeopardy. Her team, though, do say there's no means of verifying this poll. But a Labour MP I was speaking to earlier said they think it's more likely than not that Lucy Powell will win, saying she has the easier campaign to run.
Not great news for Keir Starmer, but also there's a lot of very bad news for Keir Starmer. I was saying right at the top of the show, he's under intense pressure, and there's a kind of hysteria around about his position. I still think nothing imminent is going to happen, but there's a very, very rocky road ahead.
I think you're right, Andrew, and it really depends who you speak to. You can speak to very senior people within the Labour Party who think that something could be imminent, and speak to others who think it's definitely not. I think everybody I speak to agrees that if things don't improve by May, after the May elections, then there will be some sort of challenge. But other people I speak to suggest that it's a really rocky road to actually getting to May. So the things that are coming just in the next few months are increasingly difficult polls in terms of what will happen in Wales. One tonight from ITV Wales suggesting that Keir Starmer is on course to be the first Labour leader to lose an election in Wales for 100 years. I think we will see more of that polling. Then there's the state visit, as you know, and Keir Starmer's good at diplomacy, but that could
all sorts of stuff
with
could go
jeopardy.
wrong.
Exactly. And then we've got conference, another moment that Keir Starmer has been historically good at, but he's just lost his conference speech writer. And again, another potential flashpoint. And you know who's going to be at conference? Andy Burnham.
So the real question is, does the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party allow Andy Burnham to stand in the by-election, come back and challenge the Prime Minister? And again, I think you've been talking to people tonight.
I think that is the question lots of people are asking, whether Andy Burnham would actually be able to even become an MP again so that he could challenge Keir Starmer. And people I've spoken to on the NEC are suggesting that they will try and stop Andy Burnham if they can, basically suggesting if he was to run as an MP, that would force a bigger by-election because he would have to stand down as the mayor of Greater Manchester. So I think that could tee up another massive, massive row if he's not allowed to actually stand in that by-election.
Let us very gently and respectfully put Andy Burnham to one side and ask a different question, which is, if there is a mood to try and replace the Prime Minister, it's not like the Tory party, it's much harder inside the Labour Party. So what are the basics of this that we have to understand?
So it is possible to get rid of Keir Starmer, but as you say, it's not as easy as it is in the Conservative Party. There aren't letters in the same way. And actually, the Labour rule book was updated last conference. And so the way you would get rid of Keir Starmer, if you were so inclined, you need somebody to effectively challenge him. So anybody, let's say Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, she would then need to get 80 MPs to back her. And at that point, that would then trigger a leadership contest. But if Keir Starmer immediately resigned, or if he was not able to get 80 MPs to back him, that would mean that the membership would never get involved. It would just be entirely down to the MPs.
It's down to the MPs if there's only one candidate,
exactly.
In effect. Really, really interesting. Maybe very important stuff. We'll see. Aggie, thank you very much. Now then, up next, Larry Ellison has overtaken Elon Musk as the world's richest man, and he's brought the US wing of TikTok. How will he use this new power and influence? More on that in a few minutes, but the time now 6:48.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
At 8 p.m, Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch joins me for her new monthly phone-in. Your chance to put your questions to a woman on a mission to rescue her ailing party.
Ian Dale on LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:50. We all know about Elon Musk. You may think we know too much about Elon Musk, but what about Larry Ellison? He was, albeit briefly, declared even richer than Musk and therefore the world's richest man earlier this month. With his son, he's been on a huge buying spree, which could end up with him owning Paramount, Warner Brothers and TikTok in the US, making them fabulously influential. Let's talk now to Rafe Rosner-Uddin from the Financial Times based in San Francisco. Rafe, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Just tell us a little bit about this extraordinary man. He's a big backer of Tony Blair, and I think his name itself is made up and refers to Ellis Island, where his adoptive father came through.
Well, so I think most people will have in some way, shape or form encountered or interacted with an Oracle system, but not realize it. So Larry Ellison, obviously one of the world's wealthiest men, the co-founder of Oracle, and now its CTO. He's been a sort of relatively quiet figure in some ways, but nonetheless incredibly important in recent years, a key Trump ally, someone who we understand is probably going to be party to a deal to acquire TikTok's US arm, bankrolling his son, who is on a media buying spree, and now through Oracle's dealings with OpenAI, has propelled himself up the world's rich list, and sort of briefly, as you mentioned, overtook Elon Musk, a close friend of his, last week as the world's richest person.
So he's going to have control, possibly, of TikTok in America, social media, cable television, Paramount, film, etc. He sounds quite like Elon Musk in terms of his reach into the culture.
Well, this is it. I sort of see Ellison as a quieter, less abrasive or loud sort of version of Musk
has been.
Well, no, in some ways it's quite surprising that he has remained incredibly close to Trump, given he backed another candidate, a senator from Carolina last year in the lead up to the US election. But he's appeared in the Oval Office this year. He was part of the Stargate announcement, which is the large OpenAI data center project. He was in the Oval Office alongside Trump and Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, in January. And alongside him, his chief executive at Oracle, Safra Catz, is a strong Trump backer. She is a major Republican donor, and that proximity to the Trump administration. So yes, less abrasive than Musk, but nonetheless always present and close in proximity to the administration.
Is there anybody really substantial in the American media or tech world who isn't a strong Trump backer?
Well, that's true. I would say that Ellison was one of the earliest tech backers of Trump. And I think that's something that's held him in strong stead throughout from 2016 onwards, held him in good stead with Trump, who often has falling outs with other tech investors. We've written a lot about Jeff Bezos's relationship with Trump, for example, which was quite fraught for some time before he sort of acquiesced and now has a better relationship with the president. Ellison's relationship is quite different, and it's been fairly consistent.
He's been at court a long time, but everybody is now at court. Rev Rosner-Uddin, thank you very much indeed for talking to me tonight. Now then, some sad news from Hollywood.
I'll jump first. No, then you jump first. No, I said, what's the matter with you? I can't swim!
Nowhere else have I seen such lions led by such lambs.
We're millionaires. Jesus, do you realize that loaded? Hell no, I just cut into him. I would have settled for pawning one of them.
Yes, Robert Redford has died at the perfectly decent age of 89. You know the films, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, my mum took me to that in 1969, and The Sting, All the President's Men, The Natural, Out of Africa, The Horse Whisperer. He had very good looks, and they lasted a very long time. But how good an actor was he? Let's talk now to Larushka Ivan-Zadeh, film critic at Metro. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. That's the real question. Was he a great actor?
Was he a great actor? I mean, you're right in the fact that he was a great movie star, wasn't he? He had that charisma.
Slightly different things, maybe. Yeah.
It is a different thing. And I think, he didn't perhaps have the range of some actors. I mean, recently we lost Gene Hackman, and talking about him, you talk about his acting range and the astonishing characters he played. He was never a scenery chewer, Robert Redford. And you never felt really like he was performing. I feel like he sort of, he worked with silences and watchful expressions, and he just had a particular self-possession on screen, as well as those obviously devastating good looks, which he got very cross because all the critics would often concentrate on those rather than his performances. But yeah, I mean, he had this amazing, quiet charisma that, was very distinctive on screen.
And he had a huge influence on the industry more generally. I mean, I think he was a founder, wasn't he, of the Sundance Film Festival, very famous?
Yes, that's right. I mean, that's where his legacy really lies. I mean, he was a director as well. He won an Oscar for Ordinary People in 1981. But yes, his legacy really, actually, for that he touched on so many different filmmakers, is the Sundance Film Festival, which he he instituted to champion independent filmmaking in America. And, he really helped, shape the careers of filmmakers like the Coen brothers, Quentin Tarantino, more recently Ryan Coogler, Ava DuVernay, Chloe Zhao. The film Coda in 2022 won the Oscar. That came out of Sundance.
So when I saw the comment, one of our lions has died, or one of our lions has passed, that's the kind of thing people are referring to, a kind of patriarchal figure almost inside the industry. Larushka,
yes,
if there is somebody who really doesn't understand films, doesn't see enough films, and is wondering what is the quintessential Redford film to see, what would it be, do you think?
I think it has to be Butch Cassidy, obviously, and the Sundance Kid. He plays a Wild West outlaw opposite Paul Newman. But I have a great fondness for his 2013 film, All Is Lost, where he plays a man stranded alone at sea. He was 77 when he made it, this incredible survival drama. There's only 51 spoken words in the entire film. And that's, if you really want to see a man pitted and giving himself an acting challenge at the age of 77, that was an astonishing performance. Very underrated, I think.
Larushka, I will look it up. Thank you very, very much for talking to me tonight. Now then, Donald Trump lands at Stansted this evening for a historic state visit. Former Cabinet Minister Michael Gove, who's met and interviewed the president, told me what he thinks Trump will hope to gain from the next few days.
The validation of appearing alongside the king in Windsor Castle. So in a sense, it's the symbolism of Keir Starmer and the British state putting itself at the service of Donald Trump.
Well, I will be back with you tomorrow. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you want them. You can pause, you can rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish. But right now, call Kemi Badenoch and much else besides. It's time for Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
What I need to do is make sure that the public understands what today's Conservative Party is about, not yesterday's Conservative Party.
This evening sees the launch of a monthly phone-in with the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch. She'll be here from 8 p.m. to